All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Running with Wolves. Today, I really actually want to talk about my recipe for success and super effortless sales. Now, a lot of times on TikTok or even, on the podcast, we've talked a lot about just kind of the overall marketing strategy for creating sales, but it is my very firm belief that just having a strategy alone is not going to create sales for you. I want to talk to you guys about kind of the 4 key areas that you need to be really mastering in order to scale your businesses effortlessly and create a ton of sales in the meantime. So we're going to talk about strategy, and then on top of that, we're going to talk about your production plan. We're going to talk about mindset and energy, and then we're going to talk about consistency. So those are kind of the 4, like I said, key areas where you really need to hone your skills. And I'm going to tell you why just like specializing in one area or mastering one area instead of all of those is really not going to lead to super effortless sales, because I've seen business owners favor only one of those 4 areas in different areas. And it leads to you feeling either really burnt out or creating really inconsistent sales or any of those things. So let's start really quickly about people's like misconceptions about all of those 4 areas. So a lot of people, there's 4 different camps, right? People think if you just have the right strategy, you don't necessarily need to master anything else because the strategy in and of itself is the magic pill, right? They don't understand also that you need to consistently implement that strategy. They also don't understand the fact that if you can't get that content out, i.e. your production plan, the strategy isn't going to work. And if you don't show up and sell with the right mindset and energy, you're going to essentially shoot yourself in the foot, even if you have the right strategy. So the right strategy really doesn't matter without those 3 other areas, right? Same thing in terms of energy and mindset, same thing in terms of consistency, and same thing in terms of your production plan. It's a very delicate balance of all 4 of those things in order to have success and to do it really effortlessly, honestly. And I've had to learn the hard way, to be totally honest, over the last, I would say 3.5, almost 4 years that we've had this business, because I used to be one of those people that thought all the time, I was like, oh, all you have to do is just, have the right strategy and everything will be fine. That's not correct, because as your business grows, as you become busier, if you don't know how to get your content out, if you don't know how to show up and sell when things are hard, if you don't know how to stay consistent when things are hard, you're not going to see sales, right? Okay, so really quickly, I want to start with strategy because this is something we talk about all the time, but let's just like run through it again. So in terms of strategy, remember the key things that we focus on within our Wolf framework, the phases are attract, warm, convert. So remember, the attraction piece is really all about entertaining, providing value, having a really strong hook, which is a question or a statement in terms of grabbing people's attention and really showcasing your brand personality. This phase is all about getting as many of the right eyes onto your brand or business as possible and creating brand recognition and getting people honestly to really like your brand or your business and want to binge your content more. Then we focus on the warming phase, right? Which is all about positioning you or your brand as an authority in your industry, essentially smashing all of the competitors and really showcasing that you are the go-to in your industry. You want to build trust and you want to engage your audience in this phase. So you're essentially taking those followers who are like kind of interested in your brand and you are turning them into raving fans for your brand. And then obviously we have the conversion piece. So we want to focus on selling to our target audience in a meaningful way based off of their buyer types. Remember, we've talked about the 4 buyer types before, and they all take different things into consideration when they're making a purchase or an investment. We have the amiable and the expressive buyer types. They're very feelings-based, very relational. And remember, even expressive buyer types take into consideration how their investments or their purchases are going to affect those around them. And then we have the analytical and assertive buyer types, which are more motivated by data and statistics and logistics and deliverables. Our assertive buyer types sometimes have a bit of an ego, so they need that stroked in order to make a purchase or an investment. So remember, really selling to our target audience in a way that makes sense to them based off of those things that they take into consideration when making a purchase or an investment. Other things you want to do in that phase are anticipate objections or questions that they might have. So for example, a lot of our clients deal with the financial objection and a lot of our clients deal with the timing objection. So I can't afford it, or, I'll make that purchase or that investment in a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year. It's just not the right time. I'm buying a house, I'm going on vacation, blah, 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 right? Anticipating those objections when it comes to your product or service, and you want to put those into your content so that really the goal for your content is for your target audience to consume it and be like, okay, I know that this is the exact brand that I want to work with. I absolutely love this brand or this business or that I want to purchase from. They've answered all my questions. I know it's the right product or service for me. They've handled my objections. It's really a done deal at this point in terms of me purchasing or investing. Ready, here we go kind of thing. It's essentially removing any barriers in that sales process is the goal of this framework. And then the last thing that you want to be focusing on is really selling your product or service as a solution, as a unique solution, and not a service or a product, right? We want to anticipate their problems and their desires and really showcase in our content how we are able to uniquely solve those problems or meet those desires and needs with our product or our service. So that's really the attract, warm, convert framework. So remember, the only other things you need to take into account when you're customizing this strategy and this framework is buyer types. And then you constantly want to be analyzing your marketing and your sales data. In another episode, we're going to talk about what marketing and sales data to analyze, market research, all that good stuff. A mistake I definitely see a lot of business owners make is they'll stay stuck on one specific strategy and not listen to how their audience is responding to it. You have to remember that marketing and sales is really a conversation. It's not just you like screaming at your audience. You have to listen to how they're responding to your content and adjust it accordingly. Like, for example, if they're not engaging with your content, it means it's not interesting to them. Or maybe you're not talking about things that matter to them, right? So then you need to go back to the drawing board and look at your marketing and sales data and figure out, okay, when did we have the most engaged audience? What were we talking about? Have we strayed from that? What market research do we need to do, to really find out what people are interested in so we can incorporate that into our content and move them, through that framework essentially. So make sure that with your strategy, every single month you're analyzing your marketing and sales data. And if you feel like maybe you've gotten off track somehow with your marketing and sales, you need to go back to the drawing board and do more market research. Ask your audience, listen to them, hear from them, poll your audience, have conversations with them about, what's going to get their attention, warm them, and convert them. So that's the strategy piece. Now, we've got a lot of episodes about this, obviously. So if you want to dive more in depth into that strategy piece, go listen to those. But I then want to talk about production because especially as you're scaling, this is something where a lot of our clients who are making upwards of, I would say maybe like 15 to 20K per month, at that point, you're running a successful business. You're starting to get a lot of traction, and their problem doesn't really become, I don't know what converts my audience into sales. It more so becomes, I don't have time to create content over and over again in order to, create those sales, because we know that content creates sales. But what happens if you don't have time to put that content out? That's actually a conversation I've been having a lot with some of our accelerator girls recently is like, okay, how do I adjust my schedule? How do I do any of these things in order to create that content so that we can still consistently see sales? Because something that happens a lot of times with either our clients or just business owners in general is they'll be seeing really good success from their content, a ton of sales, and then they'll become really busy because of those sales on the product or service-based side of things. So they'll back off of their marketing and off of their content because they don't have as much time to create it. And then because of that, they see a dip in sales, and then they have to not only start creating more content, and it's just this kind of like vicious cycle essentially. So my biggest piece of advice to business owners is no matter how busy life or business gets, make sure you are nailing your production strategy so you can consistently get content out so that you don't ever have to worry about the sales ebbs and flows. So in terms of production, how do we go about making sure that it's consistent? We have two production approaches. One of them we call a micro approach, and one of them we call our macro production approach. If you are a smaller or newer or greener business owner, I would say that you should be using the micro approach. Now, our micro approach is creating a lot of little pieces of content for TikTok, Instagram to repurpose across all platforms because you have a little more time to create those content pieces, right? So you're creating at least 3 TikToks a day. You're creating content for Instagram, for your feed and your stories. You're creating content for email, right? You're creating all of these little separate pieces of content that you can repurpose across all platforms. Again, because you have more time. That should really only take you, I would say, 2 or 3 hours a week. For me, I batch create all of our content, and I would say, like I said, it probably takes about 2 to 3 hours a week. Now, if you are a bigger business, meaning you are creating upwards of 6 figures a month, if you're a corporation, any of those things, I always recommend the macro approach. Now, the macro approach is, at this point in your business, it's really unrealistic for us to expect that someone would spend 2 to 3 hours a week recording a lot of little pieces of content. As a CEO or as a business owner or any of those things on the product or the service-based side of things, I know for a fact that when you get to that level, you have a lot of different things that you're doing. Not only are you vision casting for the company, you are managing your team of directors or even just your team in general. You are trying to focus on marketing and sales. You are trying to make sure that the implementation and delivery and the operations side of things is nailed, right? You're looking at every single department and you're really managing that as like an entire organization rather than being in the weeds of doing everything. So your capacity for what you're doing expands, but so does your responsibility. So with that being said, even though marketing and sales is super important, there are other things that you need to do that are equally as important. So you have to understand kind of how to leverage your time in the most effective way. And that is, like I said, with the macro approach. So what that entails is creating bigger, long form pieces of content that you can splice up in different ways and strategically repurpose across all platforms, i.e. a podcast, right? This is great long form pieces of content for us to chop up and repurpose everywhere. We repurpose it on TikTok, on Instagram, we put it on YouTube, right? So in terms of thinking about that attract, warm, convert goal, this helps us in terms of attraction content significantly. And all it takes is once a month, I spend 3 to 4 hours in a studio recording a podcast that then gives us probably months worth of content that we can repurpose strategically, like I said, across all platforms. So that's really the macro approach versus the micro approach. Macro is creating longer form pieces of content that your team can then chop up and strategically repurpose. Micro is a lot of those smaller pieces of content. So if you are a more experienced business owner, you're making, let's say, upwards of 6 figures a month, or you're a corporation or any of those things, macro is really going to be your way to go. And then if you are a smaller business owner and you still have a little bit more time, make sure that you're taking that micro approach to really consistently build your brand presence and visibility and recognition. One example that I actually had, interestingly enough, was a VIP day client that I had. This was probably like a year ago. And I had a client who was she had a 7-figure business and she was making 60 TikToks a week, you guys, 60. Now, I would only say you probably need to make about 15 a week. So she was making a mass amount of content because she thought the more content she made, the more sales she would make. So she was probably spending, I'm not joking, you guys, 10 hours a week filming content. And it wasn't increasing her sales at all. And so what we did is we actually switched her to a macro production approach. Her content strategy, we refined, we did all of that different stuff, and we were able to not only maintain her level of revenue while we significantly decreased the amount of time she had to commit to filming content. It went from like 10 hours a week to 2 hours a week. So we significantly decreased the amount of time she had to dedicate to that, but we maintained the amount of sales she was making because of the changes that we made to her strategy as well to create more sales faster with her messaging. So she got back 8 hours of time per week. That's 32 hours of time in 1 month. That is so much. Like, as a business owner, you guys know, even an hour, you can get so much done if you get that time back. 8 hours a week she got back because of that change in her production approach and was able to maintain her revenue. That is insane, you guys. The ROI of that time back, if you think about that as a business owner, is huge. So the thing you want to remember with each of these different sections in terms of strategy, production, mindset, and energy and consistency is your job as a business owner is really to be a problem solver. It's not about like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to get content out, therefore I'm not going to get content out. No, that's not what happens. It's okay, I don't have time to get content out. How can I change things up, whether it be in my schedule, my production approach, any of those things, so that I can really make sure I'm focusing in and getting our marketing to be consistent. Even if you have a team, how can I make sure that I'm doing that so that our sales don't dip and again, continue to scale? Okay, so that's production. Let's move into energy and mindset. So something I see a lot of business owners struggle with that is not something that we talk about very often is that you have to show up with the right mindset and energy in order to create sales. A lot of times I see so many business owners who have the right strategy in place. They're showing up consistently, but they're not showing up in a way that makes people want to buy from them. So there's a very big difference between if I were to show up and be like, hey guys, I'm so excited to talk to you about this offer today, blah, blah, blah. I am showing that I'm enthusiastic about what it is I'm talking about. I'm showcasing my knowledge and my expertise because I'm holding myself well, I'm presenting myself well, and there's an element of likability, really to my selling. I have talked about this before in that you have to have that know, like, trust factor with your audience. So they have to know who you are, they have to trust you, and they also have to like you in order to want to buy from you. So if you show up like freaking Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh and you're like, hey guys, I'm going to talk to you today about my products or my services, and I'm just like really hoping that you buy from me, no one's going to buy from you, right? Or if you don't show up confidently, people buy from people first, right? Let's just put that out there. And if that person that they are buying from, brand or business, B2B or B2C, is not confident in what it is that they are selling, why would your consumer be confident, right? So you have to show up with the right energy and mindset that the sales have already happened. It's just a matter of getting there. And that is a mindset shift that changed the game for me significantly. For example, last summer, I've told this story before, there were 2 months where, because of how we positioned like our compensation with our team, not because of our sales, but just because of comp, our profit margins were shot. And so there was a turning point where I was like, holy shit, we're going to be in the negative this month because we had more money going out the door than we had coming in. And it was like that for 2 months. Could I have very easily said, okay, we have to close our doors? Absolutely. But instead, I changed everything internally so that we could have good profit margins. But then I realized we needed to bring more money in very quickly, obviously. So I had the right strategy in place. I showed up consistently, but it would have been so easy for me to be like, holy shit, we don't have any money coming in, and show up almost in like this desperate energy of like, please buy from me. But I didn't. I showed up super confidently. I showed up like I knew what I was talking about. Like I knew the sales were going to get there because, again, it's not, as a business owner, everything is figure outable. That's what I always say. Get into problem solving mode. And so I'm like, I know how to sell. I know how to market effectively. I'm going to show up and I'm going to create a ton of sales and make sure that we're good for the next couple of months. And that's exactly what I did because my mindset was essentially the sales have already happened. Here's how I'm going to show up. And I visualized every single time that I was selling the feeling of creating that sale. And I harnessed it as I was showing up and as I was talking about our services or our products or creating content or brainstorming or any of those things to make sure that the energy was really high and the audience could feel that. The things that I do not care about in terms of your excuses are as follows. I don't care if you don't feel like showing up. You need sales in order to maintain your business. You are not owed anything in terms of content performing well, in terms of creating sales, in terms of any of those things. You have to show up. You have to perfect your mindset. You have to show up consistently with the right strategy in order to see those sales. Again, no one owes you a sale. So you have to figure out how to make that happen. If you don't have the time, I don't care, make time, switch your schedule around. I'm literally these days right now, just because it's a crazy season of business, there are seasons in business, I'm working 12 to 14 hours a day a lot of times. And that's just the reality of things sometimes, and that is okay. And will it calm down again? Absolutely. Am I going to continue to power through and make sure my mindset and all of that stuff is there until we can get past this phase? Absolutely. Am I going to continue to make sure that every area of our production, mindset, consistency, strategy is perfected and show up that way until we're out of this season? Absolutely. Because, like I said, business is super seasonal and you have to just become an excuse eliminator if you want to see success. That's just the reality of things. So then moving into consistency in terms of being an excuse eliminator, remember that there are so many people that will implement a strategy for not even a week, like 3 days, and be like, guys, I don't understand why I'm not seeing sales. The reality is that your audience needs to hear things 8 to 12 times before they even consider purchasing or investing with you. That is just the reality of things, because as consumers, we have to hear things over and over and over again. It's like if you're a teacher or you're training your team or any of those things, it just doesn't sink in for us until we hear it over and over and over again. So when people are considering buying from you, you have to say it over and over again. And typically, I would say a strategy takes anywhere from 60 to 90 days to really start seeing a lot of momentum. And so it's important that you stay consistent with your messaging, with your content, with your strategy, with everything. The example that I always use for this is like, let's say you go on a first date, right? If they propose, you'd be like, what the hell is going on? Like way too fast, right? Or if you didn't want to go home with them on the first date or any of those things and they didn't respect your boundaries there, you'd slap the shit out of them a lot of times. But you, as a business owner, in terms of consistently marketing only for like 2 or 3 days and expecting people to buy from you, is the exact same thing. You have super high expectations and assume that things are going to happen really quickly when that is not the reality of things. That's not how people operate. They just need a little bit of time to let it sink in. So your job is to stay consistent with your strategy and with your messaging so that they have the ability to continue consuming that and do want to buy from you. It requires patience, and sales is very much a relationship. It's a conversation, and you have to treat it as such for people to really want to buy from you. The last thing I will say about consistency, and this is something that was taught to me by a mentor a really long time ago, which has always kind of stuck with me. If you can't stay consistent in the little things, how are you going to stay consistent with the big things, right? So if you can't stay consistent posting 3 TikToks a day, how can you be consistent in leading a team? How can you be consistent in terms of creating, a ton of sales for your business, right? You train yourself to stay consistent and to increase your capacity, and that starts with the really little things. And so you're teaching your brain every time we stay consistent and we make a commitment and we keep it, our brain is like, okay, yes, this is exactly what we should be doing right now. And so you're teaching your brain to stay consistent, and eventually, like I said, things build, your capacity builds, and you stay consistent in the really big things too. So remember that in order to see success, this is really my recipe for success, you have to have all 4 of these components: strategy, mindset and energy, consistency, and the right production plan. So if right now you're not seeing sales from your content, I want you to look at all 4 of those areas within your business and ask yourself, am I doing a good job doing these things? Am I doing these things over and over and over again? And if so, how long have you been doing it? Have you been doing it with the right energy? And if not, make shifts and changes. If you're still not seeing sales, look back at your marketing and your sales data. Look back at your market research. Maybe do more market research. Remember that everything is figure outable. And if at that point you're trying to DIY it and you really can't figure it out, ask for help. There's no issue with asking for help or admitting that you don't necessarily know how to do something. That is okay too. And as always, if you guys do have questions, like I've said before, I love talking about this stuff. This is my jam in terms of helping people figure this stuff out. So head to my DMs on Instagram, ask me questions. Let's work this stuff out so that you guys can see more sales consistently, because that is really our mission for like the next couple of years, is really that impact and making success as accessible as possible to so many business owners. So head over to my DMs if you have questions, let me know. And as always, tune into the next episode and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye guys.